Hello. Oh, I don't need these. Hang them there maybe. So, welcome. I thought I've been away for a while. I've been doing many things, moving, some life things, stuff. But I thought I will go back and look at some Karl2D things again. Oh, I don't have my recovery codes. Well, that's not for now. Oops. So, what did we do last time? Where did we leave off? Let's see. So, we go to the folder where I have the repository. I think I worked a bit on it on my laptop maybe. And then projects file here we can open. Then we close all that, and then we close all that. All right. So we have this little library for making 2D games. Play the snake game here. I worked on stuff like pre-multiplied alpha got working, so this uses pre-multiplied alpha instead of, which means that you multiply the alpha value into the colors of the texture rather than just having it separately. So you change how you sample the texture a bit. It's just good in very good to do in many cases where you otherwise get weird artifacts around half-transparent things and stuff. What more do we have? So this is a Raylib demo that I ported before to the camera. And then, you know, we have the classic Raylib bunny mark. Stuff like that. So, what are we doing now? Where are we? I have a to-do, I think, that we can look a bit at. So what does it say here? What to add? So we have direct 3D support, right? And we have OpenGL support. We need to do a Linux backend at some point. It's not going to happen today. One thing I do need to fix is the sort of font stuff. The font stuff isn't perfect. If we look at the snake game here, this text should be crisp. It's a bit blurry. It's a bit weird all over the place. But might not do that today. Here it says render texture, direct 3D 12, not GL. Didn't I implement this in GL already? Maybe I didn't. Maybe that's what we should do. So this is in direct 3D 12. It renders this once into a texture, and then it blitzes it there and there and there. Right. So perhaps we should look at that. So if we look at the render back, so the API for the set render texture, you just, well, you send in a render texture here, and you can send in nil if you don't want a render texture, if you want to stop having a render texture. That's instead of having like a begin texture mode like in Raylib, you just say set render texture and it keeps that state until you pass nil, at which point it will start using the back buffer again. I think we have an example. This is the example we looked at, right? We looked at this example. So what we see here is it clears it blue. No, it clears it blue there. But here it sets the render texture to a render texture we created up here. 128 by 128. And then it draws some rectangles, some circles, and the text. And then it unsets the render texture by pressing nil here. And then it draws the texture in a few different positions here with rotations and stuff. Then it presents the back buffer, and then we free. I don't know why the temp allocator stuff is a bit. I haven't really thought that out yet because it's maybe I don't. Actually, I think I've stopped using a temp allocator inside the library. So what I do instead, I have a frame allocator. You know, temp allocators is about in order to use a temp allocator, you need to find a nice lifetime that makes sense. So what I do is I have some stuff that needs to be valid until present is run, like things related that will go into the current batch and stuff. Well, the current batch goes until draw current batch, but there are certain things that you might want to keep alive until the end of the frame. What is this, for example? Here we load a file, a texture I mean, and we load it up to the GPU, and I could just allocate this and then, you know, deallocate it immediately. But it's hello, Raph loves you. That's nice. Yeah, it was good timing. I haven't been streaming almost at all for a long time, so good timing. Make the chat a bit bigger, like that. Anyways, so we have. I put it on the frame allocator because I just want some to allocate it until. I could probably deallocate it right after this call here, because that will go into render back and we could upload the GPU, but you know, some kind of reasonable lifetime for throwaway memory. A lot of this, I load a font from file, do the same thing again. I load a shader, and some of that will be valid for the frame, like the stuff that you don't need in the long run. And I think maybe yeah, when it updates the font, it's just any kind of throwaway memory where you would usually use the temp allocator in your code. I use my own frame allocator because I don't want to enforce the lifetime of the temp allocator onto someone else. Like, I don't want them to have to run context, free all context of temp allocator, because it's a bit weird with the temp allocator and using it inside your library code. I think there is this thing called a temp allocator guard also that's used sometimes in the core libraries, but random guy asks, will there be another Odin jam? Yeah, probably sometime next year. Probably not. I did a Christmas jam once, but I have too much things to do this Christmas, so maybe we'll see. Maybe I can arrange something in January or something. No, nothing promised yet though. Anyways, so this render texture thingy, if we run it, so I have this little edit project right here, and here where is the bunny mark, snake, render texture. If I take this one, copy it, and then we see like this GL, and we add in this line right here. Close that, and then open this thing, and now it's there. Around that, I don't. No, that was the wrong one. What happened? I wanted this one. So you see, this is not going so well. So what's happening here is that, well, many things are broken. Okay, if I just don't set the render texture, what happens then? Okay. Right, so these calls to, wait, it clears it here, so let's not do that. And then you see up here, it drew these things. You can put the text back. So this is sort of what was drawn into, supposed to be drawn into render texture, but now it's just drawn to the back buffer because I disabled this and that. And then we'll take that back. So now then we have something to work with. Let's see here. I'm a bit uncertain exactly what's even going on there. Why does it look like that? Let's have a look in the render doc. Render texture. This one? This one is old. I renamed the... Yeah. Capture. Go in here, have a look. Hi Llama Toast, welcome. So we clear it, then we draw these things, then it's cleared again, and then this is drawn. Where, what? Oh, that's the I think I know what's going on. Why is the, how does the text here survive the clear though? Like, that's weird. Let me explain what I'm just trying to make sure I understand exactly what's going on. How? Look at this. There's a clear here. Some kind of magical text. Hello, Eugynx. Welcome, thank you. How on earth does that... Okay, that's the first thing I'm interested in here. Because if I don't clear this, then it will just be blue, right? How did this survive a whole clear? Like... Is there something with the weird with the alpha that it... Let's see. It might be. That might actually be exactly what's wrong. GL clear. Buffer bit. Color buffer bit. Is there like a... Is that a thing? No, I get it. It's a bit weird. Let's rerun render doc and inspect the... I just want to understand what's going on, how that can survive a clear. Should not. Okay, withdraw array. Clear. Wait, why are they out of order? Wait, does the clear not draw the batch? It must. That's the... Well, there's your problem. I think. No, I don't save that. Oh, I think I don't think my GPU goes like. I think I'm running at several frames per second. Okay, now it works. That was just, it was missing. This should of course be here because otherwise, yeah. And this just if there is anything in the batch, it submits it. That's all it does. Hmm. 20 people watching. Hello everyone. Nice to see so many people tuning in. Right. Just gonna double check. Is that? No. All right. All right. Did I? So yeah, I moved. I have moved. I have a new room here. It's on my right here is the bed, but I've also stashed my office table in it, so I made it into like bedroom. I didn't have a dedicated room for office, but at least I have a room that I don't use for anything else. Because I used to have my table out in the living room, and it's nice to have some table in a corner in a room where you aren't that much, except when you sleep. That's the best compromise I could find. But it's a bigger apartment. I have a robot vacuum cleaner because I borrowed one from my parents because they don't use theirs. It's so I've been trying to like not have too many things on the floor and all that, and I set it to speak Japanese because that's more funny. So it's like this. Suddenly all this blah 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 onegaishimasu. That's fun. Not that I know too much Japanese, but doesn't matter. It says in the app what happened actually. So what it says, the voice on it doesn't matter too much. Anyways, so now we have this. This is what, now this makes sense to me. Maybe, yeah. So what you're seeing here, this is actually the render texture hasn't been created properly, but it's accidentally drawing the font Atlas. That's what you're seeing. That's why it's like this weird herlop, because these are the 5 letters in our font Atlas, because we're only drawing these 5 letters plus the exclamation mark. That's all there is to it. So, but there is a subtle bug here that maybe this shouldn't really draw anything, because texture 0 should not be anything, I think. Can I try this? We'll go back to GL. No, direct meow meow. And then we do this. We make a 0 initialized render texture. In that case, it's all gray. I think maybe there's a little bug in because if we look in the render backend, D3D11, then in here, when you, what's it called? On init, maybe. Does it maybe append a dummy texture at slot 0? That's what I'm thinking. Textures. Well, it's a handle map, so it should be one at 0. Okay, that's good. Because my handle map automatically has a dummy element at 0, because that makes zero initialized work better. Right. So then the big question is render texture. Wait. Where did it go? Where's my hello P? Am I? Oh no, I'm confused now. Why it's not drawing it anymore? What happened? I'm very confused. Okay, this one. Wait. It uses it. Yes, currently it supports Direct3D and OpenGL. You can choose which backend you want. Direct3D, of course, only works on Windows and maybe on some Xboxes. And maybe if you use Proton, you could use Direct3D on Linux. And then you have OpenGL, which I will use on Linux, just for starters. And I will also clone the OpenGL backend and try to use it as a basis for a WebGL backend. But it has a generic, like if you look in the Karl2D file, which is then, this one doesn't know which, this one can use any backend. So it says here s.rb equals render backend, and then it uses rb dot things here. rb.present, rb.resize swapchain, rb.draw, create texture. RB is just RB. Oh, no, everything's Chinese. RB equals s.rb. It will. That's just a convenient global it makes, but it's actually s.rb. That's the main state of the library. But it picks the renderer like this. I like that. Oh, I thought it was. It's mentioned several times, so I have this many symbols. Like that. So you see here that default render backend on Windows is D3D11. Here I will add more and more on add platforms, so I have a default. Then you can use a custom one. That's what I do. Edit project. In here, we have this thing here, right? Or you can say GL or D3D11. So if you want to override the default, you can do that. So then you have your custom. If the custom isn't set, then it just uses the default. But if it is set, then it tries to match it to GL, D3D11, or Panex if you're using an invalid value. This is wrong, and rename the constant. And these are constants that come from the backends themselves. So if we look in the GL backend, which is just a separate file, then we have this stuff, which is just an implementation of an interface. And the interface is just a struct of procedure pointers or struct of procedures. In Odin, in C, you have this weird thing where you have functions and they can have function pointer. And it's a bit weird, like you just assign a function to a function pointer and you don't, like it behaves a bit weirdly. What Odin instead does is that all the functions, they're saved in your program. It's saved it's in memory somewhere. But every proc in the code itself that you use is actually just a point. So it's always a function pointer. This is a function pointer to that proc in over somewhere. But I guess but they don't pay for any indirection or anything there. I think that's optimized, but it just makes it so that when you have just a struct like this of where you want to make an interface, you don't have to write like some annoying like pointer thing like that, because all proc is always sort of a function pointer, even the ones this one, this one too, that has a definition, is also sort of a. What if you returned from a function? What do you mean? Anyways, so this is how a render backend looks, and this is what GL implements and what Direct3D implements. And I'm still, at first I had a D3D11 backend only, and then I added a GL. I had to modify this slightly, this because I had made some assumptions that was maybe a bit direct 3D-ish. So yeah, what if you return a struct of function pointer function dynamically? Well, that would work. I mean, if you, I think what you mean is if you had like, what you mean is this, right? If you had like a get procs is a proc that returns some struct, and some struct is a struct that has like my proc, which is a field that is a proc that returns an integer, something like that, right? Then you could say s equals some struct, and you could even put a proc is a proc is a proc that returns an int. It returns 5 or 7, better number, and then you say my proc equals a. Wait, what's up with this weird? Why did I use that weird? So this will work, and I understand your confusion, because you would think that, oh, am I returning now, since it's a pointer, am I returning memory to a stack memory? That's probably what you're thinking of. Like, is this dangerous, you're thinking, because s is a thing, and if this is always sort of a pointer, then wouldn't this return stack memory? The answer is no, because these don't. This is sort of this compile time constant. This a colon here, so it's a compile time known value. But the procedures are all stored, like this procedure here. This thing is stored somewhere, right, in memory. Not inside a stack. It's just stored like, oh, all these constant these procs will be put somewhere in memory. That is valid for the whole execution of the program, and then this a proc here, references to that. So it just, this will just, yes, it contains a pointer to that proc that is somewhere else, but it's not gonna. It doesn't. There's nothing here living on the stack. A proc is not scoped. No. I don't know exactly. Do you mean like there's no closures? Like this proc here does not see any values around it. It only sees the global constants, for example. So you don't get automatically like the stuff from the surrounding. You can't do this, right? You can't do that because this one doesn't automatically capture anything. It's identical to it being like this, essentially. Just that the only difference is that if it's defined in here, then you won't be able to use it out here. You can't use a proc somewhere else. Like you can't write a proc here, for example. But yeah, it's quite simple like that. Anyways, that's that. Just a little detour. No, it's different in different languages. I mean, this is just how it works in this language. I mean, some languages have like, especially very dynamic, languages with lots of automatic memory management will also have many times have lots of automatic capturing of things in the scope around it and stuff. Some have manual that you can manually bring in variables, like C++. lambdas have that. So it doesn't really have closures at all. You know, it's just a procedure like any other procedure. The only thing about it is that you can put them, you can declare them inside a function, but it doesn't do anything special. It's just that it won't be available to use outside of the function. Very unfancy. Anyways, what were we doing before we talked about all that? I was confused. Why did my I had this. I saw my render texture draw. No, my what's it called? I saw the font atlas draw. Wait, then it never draws. Okay. Yeah, I thought it would draw the font atlas again. Well, that's a bit weird. That it behaves differently now. Maybe just luck. No. Or did I change something in the example? And yeah, thank you, Duck Egg Carbonara, by the way. Says it's a cool project. Yeah, I think it's gonna be useful. I want it to be like as easy, kind of as easy to get going with as Raylib, but a bit nicer to ship games with. So you have a bit more power at the end of production. But for making like shipping 2D games, which is what I've done, you know, I know the problems that you can run into, and I want to skip some of those. But I'm confused now. What is going on? Oh well. These draws just don't seem to do anything anymore, which is fine. I mean, what is the? Oh wait, I'm stupid. Yeah, you know, I did remove the creation of the render texture. Like I did. Look at this. I did do that. Okay, that's D3D11, and now we see our font atlas again. I wonder what's inside this. What did you get? So you got a render texture that has a texture, and then there is a render target. Right, this is, to me, this is supposed to be a null texture, like it's not supposed to be in a texture. So why is it able to draw using it? So we come into here and we say batch texture, it's text.handle. Okay, so we have gotten all the way there. Yeah, that's 3 draw calls with those. Draw current batch. Batch render target. I know this is not implemented correctly yet, all of this, but I was just curious how this can happen. Because this I think it's some GL state crap. The texture is still bound because this doesn't happen. Because this doesn't work. Maybe. How do you can you just do this and T this here is the how do I do that? That no longer draws. That's kind of what I expected now. Lamato says making a game library is more complex than I would have thought. Yeah, well, it depends on what you want to do, but if you want something that's there's a lot of nuances to consider. If you want it to be easy to use, then you need to do very good API design. I mean, I borrowed lots of API from Raylib, and I just changed the parts I don't like, and then I've introduced some other parts. But all the stuff below that is quite different from Raylib, and that's the part where I'm like, oh, making it easy to ship games. Maybe you would need some more explicit control. That's probably not required. GL, okay, I'm trying to remember here how this works. So you activate a texture, right? Should this really be texture 0? Or should it be like, should this count up? Let's see. Oh, damn it. Specifies which texture unit to make active. The number of texture units is implementation dependent, but must be at least 80. Texture must be one of the yield texture I, where I ranges from 0 to the max value, blah 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 blah. GL active texture selects the texture unit subsequent texture, blah 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 blah. Okay, but what? That's good. Yeah, someone asked this. If I understand correctly, you have to call GL active texture to set the texture unit first, and then bind one or more texture target. Yeah, exactly. So you put, I think that's if you want to render with multiple textures at once, which I don't really do because the texture that comes in, well, wait, I do support that. How does this work? How did I do it? Usually when I'm confused, I go to the D3D11 backend and look, because that one makes more sense. Yeah, this is if I have... So, what's happening here is... Of course you can draw with multiple textures. You can have several textures in your shader. Default vertex, no, default fragment. Like, you can do stuff like this. You could have several of those. And I've checked that works. I'm not sure if it actually works like I've done it here. Maybe we should try this. Didn't I have a multi-texturing example before? So we have this thing, right? Do we have an extra texture somewhere we can use? We have this plop.png here. Let me try this. Take minimal, copy it, and then we do multi-texture. Right? Then we remove this and that. Oh, you can remove multi-texture. Pull that in. Multi-texture example. Blah 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 blah. I'm gonna get a tiny refill of my coffee. Be right back. La-da-di. Nu ska vi se. Multi-texture example. It's good to make these examples for yourself so you can check that things actually work. Right, so we just grab this one from the minimal folder instead, right? And then we grab the plop, this one, takes two, and that's from the plop is in. I just don't want, the reason I'm not copying it is just to not get too many extra resources in my folders. Right, takes one. One. This still works. Destroy the texture. Destroy the texture. Still works. Now we draw the texture. 2, and this is not gonna use multiple textures at the same time because it will switch which texture it uses in the batch. That's not the point. How do I? We'll see if this makes any sense. 900. How big is this window? Hello, overshot. Blah blah. Maybe I'll take the snake food instead. Oh wait, it's the, yeah. It failed loading that one. Foo. Can't even type. Oh, JPEG. No. PNG. Come on. There you go. Oh, it's very big. There you go. Maybe like that, just to. So we have that example, right? And we have this one. Both work fine. That's good. What I'm thinking is, isn't it possible to so I don't have like a, I don't support currently platform independent shaders, which we will look at some point. So this is the default shader for D3D11. So what I'm gonna try to do here is to see if I can draw with two textures in the same draw call. Okay, I think that should work. Right, so then we load. Load. Is that it? Wants the source. There's no load from file. That's arguably a bit weird, because there's load from file here. Load shader from file. It was in the Nagul Christian asks, do you know any example in Odin plus Rayleigh with Ray-GUI that can be used to learn how to build GUI apps? I mean, no, there are some I think there are some examples in the C Rayleigh examples that you could maybe port over, or unless maybe they've imported. Let's see. Odin Lang. See here, there are a bunch of examples in here. Ports. Shapes, text, textures, shaders. I think you have all these right in the official Ray GUI, and it sort of looks like this, right? So you can look at that. It's in C, but you should be able to. I mean, it's not. It should be pretty straightforward to try. So go to the Ray GUI repository and look in examples. And you can look at the picture of how it looks, see if it's what you want. I find it a bit weird this is a string. This should be a byte array of data, I think. Let me look at the render backend load shader VS source. Yeah, it is. Yeah. This here should be like this. And this is load shade. Oh. Fragment shader bytes. And this is load shader from memory. And load shader here in the render backend interface. If we look at it. Wow, that's a long one. I'm gonna break that one up. This is weird. Why is there even a default here? It's a bug. We're gonna import base runtime. Ray GUI is okay. It's, I mean, it's for making tools for games, kind of. That's the main purpose. But it's, you know, it's an it works okay. So we're gonna do that. Just because it got a bit long, this. When it gets past the there's a line over here, I tend to break them up. But I only do it if I'm already changing it, so I don't sit around. Yeah, for GUI library, we'll see exactly. I mean, maybe I'll try making a small GUI library on top of this, because I already have some GUI library code that I wrote myself. Like something very snappy that just runs on top of the rendering library. Well, which GUI you should use to make desktop application with C? Yeah, I don't know. Many people have made their own. Like if you look at programs like Rad Debugger, it uses its own. Like it sets up a renderer and. But if you don't want to do that, then many people just use Dear GUI. It's quite popular. But yeah, you can make it. You can use it to make desktop applications. You might have to do some theming of it, unless you want it to look like a default application in that GUI framework, which might look a bit awkward. But yeah, I don't think there is a definitive answer to this. Vertex shader data is a slice of bytes. Pixel shader data is a slice of bytes. Compile a bit. And we can remove this line for now. Then we go here. GL load shader. This one is wrong now. Here should be VS data, we can call it. Array of bytes. FS data. An array of bytes. I just pressed Alt F4 for some reason there. I just gave up. Compile shader from source. This function takes the shader data. I closed the file again. I don't know what's wrong with me. There's no plans to put it in. I mean, I haven't asked anyone about putting it in vendor. It's, who knows? We'll see. If things in vendor, usually things that are very so popular that they are considered like. Anyways, shader data here is supposed to be an array of bytes. And let's see here. As you see here, it's just, this will probably just work now. I mean, I need to fix this one too, but slice of byte, slice of byte. Let's just call this data, because it might not be the source in there. That's why I'm a bit picky about these names. Default vertex shader source. Another one. There's a way to ask the the taskbar on the side is just the reason I have it there is because this is a widescreen monitor, right? I mean, that's what everyone has these days, and it has a lot of space on horizontally and not so much vertically. So it makes sense to have something that's always there on the side, not on the bottom or top, because you don't want to, just like you don't want to install lots of toolbars in Internet Explorer, because no, but you know, you have seen all these pictures with people who have like 10 toolbars because they click yes and everything back in Internet Explorer times. That's sort of how it feels a bit to me with the taskbar on the bottom. It gets cramped. Yeah, Windows 11 doesn't allow, they rewrote the whole taskbar, and then they didn't allow you to put it there anymore. So if you want to make Windows 11 an actual usable operating system, this is Windows 10, by the way, but because I don't have a TPM chip in this computer, but maybe I'll fix that. I can slot one into the motherboard, but in the EU they prolonged the lifetime of Windows 10 by a year. So anyways, there's this start all back, I think it's called. Windows 11 from, yeah, it's paid, but it allows you to move the start menu wherever you want to the side. Like you can do this, and you can customize it however you want, make it look like Windows 10 if you want. But it's, yeah, it is silly that Windows 11 removed it. And people that complain about it, they say, it's not prioritized. I'm like, isn't that quite a common thing to do, put it on the side? At least it's just like this. If you just put it in, it won't hurt anyone. Like maybe they want everyone's Windows to look the same because they have some dream about like some kind of, everyone knows how the Windows look. I don't know, honestly. It's weird, but yeah, I think if you want to use this, then you need, and it costs $5, and it's a perpetual license, I think. So you don't need to, you should pay once $5, for this, and you get a they fix Windows for you. Here's some random Swedish about wanting to log into Google. No. And for some reason the taskbar tends to become bigger. I tend to do this sometimes, and then it just swells every now and then. I don't know what's up with that really. So I'm just doing very random things there today. I think we want a byte array here, because a slice of bytes, because in some cases it might not be the source. It might be like some pre-compiled, what is it called then? Default shader vertex. It's a bit of a, this sentence is a bit backwards. Default shader vertex. Default vertex shader data. Usually the word data is, should I just call it source? Whatever, I just call it source. You say here on OpenGL I just load it's unsafe to return a compound literal blah 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 blah. Huh? But load refers to a slice of bytes that... Is this a bug? Why is it... I think that's a bug in the compiler. Because this thing, the slice will refer to read-only data. Like, that works. It's just when you immediately return it, it doesn't. Fragment source. There you go. And this, of course, you just remove this. So in HLSL, the vertex and the pixel shader, whatever you want to call it, are the same file. Why can't it do that? Oh, because it's a string here. No. I don't think so. Or am I stupid here, or is this a bug? Because this is not referring to any. This is referring to data inside this thing, which refers to RO data. This slice of bytes is not stack allocated. I think it's wrong. Load shader from memory, like that. Compile shader from source. Wait, what's happening? Oh, I renamed the previous. Let's just call it source. I kind of, data became such a generic name. Okay, yeah, let's call it source. So the thing is, some of these might come pre-compiled in some backends, depending on how you set things up. So that's good. That's a little detour. Load shader from memory. Then we can do load shader from file. How does the load texture look now again? Load texture. Yeah, I don't have like a load texture now I can overload it, because I think the explicit function overload is, I don't know. I don't think it doesn't make anything clearer really. So you say load texture from file or load texture from bytes, and load texture from file actually just reads the file and then runs load texture from bytes. Load shader from file. A proc that takes a file name. Wait, maybe I don't want this one. Maybe I don't want this one to exist because it implies this is the thing about the thing about the what shader language, what kind of intermediate format is used for shaders. Because there might be some backends that can't even load it from a file because they need you to pre-compile it using some. Well, okay, I guess I will have a compiler, a shader compiler, a default one for each backend. I'm very tired today. Sorry for the yawning. Yeah, I'm not sure this one should exist even. Let's try writing it and see what happens. Because in GLS it will be weird because you would keep the same. You would use the same file for both these. Well, you can. You don't have to, but you can. Layout formats here is for choosing the pixel format of the inputs in the shader. Ooh. Keyboard froze. Now it's back. It's my my USB problem. I've also had sometimes that then I see the audio interface is fine, but I've had problems also where it shut down. It lost like the power to the microphone. There is something wrong with this computer. I think this is actually the hardest part of making these kind of things, is choosing how to deal with shaders. Because they are vertex source. Yeah, they are just like, do you want a giant cross compiler? Because if you have several backends like I do, how do you handle shaders? How do you make it nice for the users? What's the like, do you use some cross compiler and stuff? So my idea is that do it sort of like the STL stuff, right? that you send in an array of bytes. And that can be pre-compiled shaders using a cross-compiler, but the cross-compiler lives outside of the library, so that the library doesn't assume that you always use this cross-compiler. So there won't be one shader language. Like, the library supports whatever is most native to the API, rendering API used, but then I will somehow, and I haven't thought this out exactly yet, somehow supply a cross-compiler. Hello, conformist. La la la. Welcome to me yawning and programming. The Alex says, but how do you then deal with bindings? I'm not sure I follow it. I mean, you can figure things out from the shader using shader reflection. Some of that there might be a need to, we'll see exactly how it works, because you might need to do some of the shading reflection outside in the transpiler thingy. Yeah, so I'm not sure. Conformist asks, do you work full-time on game dev? Well, yeah, well, no, not really, but I do many different things. Some of them are game dev, but I have full time thing. I mean, I wrote a book also on the Odin, and I make games. I'm making this library, and I also have a little bit of a contracting work I'm doing some days a week. So it's a bit all over the place. GLS and VGS. In one you specify layout differently. Well, I think that's gonna be fine how you specify the layout. I didn't make it work with HLSL and GLSL, which are quite different in many ways. I support custom shaders, but it's yeah, it's the most complicated part probably of the whole thing. Is this OS2 or OS1? What is? It's just it's a standard one. It's just a bool then. Fragment source frag. Well, we can do this. If vertex file if vertex file name equals, well, if fragment file name equals vertex file name, then we do this. If not vertex source, okay, then we say log.error failed loading shader s vertex file name, return nothing. What's wrong with this? Oh, but I thought this was not OS2. Is it not OS2? Core OS. Oh, that's I have explicit allocator set up here so that I don't use the wrong allocator by mistake. That's why. I mean, ensure is just that's just an assert that runs even in non-debug mode. Ensure is just assert that is not stripped in release. I mean, we use the frame allocator here. Will you be creating some Karl2D tutorials down the track? Yeah, for sure. Then fragment source is equal to vertex source because they were the same. Otherwise, it's okay. And then fragment source, comma, fragment source okay equals os.read entire file. Fragment file name allocator. If not, fragment source okay. Log.error failed loading shader fragment file name return nothing. This is just a check if they're the same file name, which might happen on GLS, HLSL and stuff. Hi Christopher, welcome. And now we can just do this. Return load shader from memory, vertex source, fragment source, layout formats. We can just do that. Yeah, curly and vendor. That I'm gonna rewrite some. I have some build script written in Python because I couldn't download files for using Odin properly. But since I have this curly and vendor, since the curly and vendor now, I could do that because I had some build scripts that I needed to download. Like I have this. What's it called? This library, Socal. I have some Socal templates for doing like hot reload with Socal and stuff. Then I wanted to download the latest Socal and all that and build it and stuff. But the download, you need some kind of download thingy, and there wasn't one really built in. Like that didn't need me to bundle some external dependency or something. But now I could use curl in vendor. Yeah, I don't think emGUI is making it in. I think into vendor. I don't think it's gonna happen. Cat and onion sequel in Karl2D. We'll see. May make some game. I think it's. I don't remember the exact reasoning for emGUI not being a vendor, but it's. I mean, it's not. Doesn't it require like doesn't it have too many weird, like it depends on you having some backend to draw it into, like it's not, I don't know really. But yeah, you can just download. I mean, if you're making a big project, like things being in vendor is good, because if you want to make something script like that, someone can just download and run without having to install dependencies. If you're making an actual program that's gonna be big, you just put the emGUI into your, like, just put the bindings into your repository. It's not a problem, you know. We do this process events k2.set shader should like that. And now if we go to shader.hl, let's change the name of this so I don't use the wrong one. Multi-texture shader. Let me just check that this works by removing that thing. Fade loading shader. Okay. Let's remove all the red color from it. What's wrong with this? Oh, this is a wrong programming language. Right, so this works. What did I do? Ah, I changed the name. Smart. As you might have noticed, I'm a bit tired. I keep yawning, and here you go. Now it worked, but lost the red channel there. Okay, so that this thing works. I'm not sure if it's a good idea, because as you see immediately with HLS, with what's it called? Direct 3D, it's immediately a bit weird that you have it twice here. And also, when we do get to the point where we maybe have some cross compilation happening outside the library, both these, well, this whole API might change them. We'll see. We can keep it like that for now. Okay, let's make another texture sampler like this. Text 2, text 1, SMP, text 1. That should work. Still? No, it was very angry about something. Ah, this needs to be called text 1 because that's the default texture sampler. Hello, must have been the wind. Must have been the wind. I'm doing some, just checking. I'm doing some example just to double check that things work as I thought they do. Not really doing the thing I was supposed to do, which was get render textures to work on GL. I'm instead doing some example. Hello. Okay. So. How do I even use two textures? I'm very confused. Like in my library, how would I even use this one? Because I sampled this here. That's good. Well, maybe I just do this. C2. Right, now it's angry or something. But none is bound. Right. The picture fix the sample. Okay, okay. Now, the question is, how do I set that one? And that for some reason I'm leaking memory here. Not 100% sure what's up with that. Oh, I'm not destroying the shader, that's why. Okay, shader should. Oh, there you go. Now those disappeared. I'm a bit confused by my own library. I haven't worked on this in a while, so current patch. Shade texture bind point. Do you just do this maybe? Oh no, I meant text2.handle. Well, that worked. Didn't expect it to, but it did. Since it's sampling the other texture, which has also alpha in it, so it sort of masks it out. It's a very weird thing, but you know, it worked. So what I'm, and I think you can even, let me see here, Karl2D shader. I think, yes, you can do this texture lookup. So you can do this shade.texture lookup, and then you can say text2. I think that's how you do it, at least. And then that works, because what is screaming about something here. There's a stupid apple everywhere. What's the problem? Why is this screaming? No. Backend D311. Yes, but it expects a sampler to be set at. Okay. Maybe something with my sampler setup is wrong. Does it say anything when I start? No. Just do that and turn it off quickly. No. Huh. Might be a little buggerino there then. Let's see. Because what I do, here's one of the most annoying things, because if you look at vertex fragment shader, here's in OpenGL you have the texture and the sampler sort of have this. They're associated with each other. For each, you get sort of a sampler state, which is like where you can set like how are we gonna, what sampling mode are we gonna use? So it's gonna be like a linear smooth, or it's gonna be like a pixely one, you know, stuff like that. You set on the sampler, and if you make two textures in OpenGL like this in your shader, in GLSL I mean, then you have a sampler state per texture. HLSL has done this thing, right, where you have it separately, and you could in theory reuse the same sampler state. You can have one texture in the shader and two textures in one sampler state, and use the same sampler state for both. But then if you make a library like this one, where you try to associate render backend D311 set texture filter, we try to associate the texture with a specific filter. So here's my scale down filter. When you do that, then sort of breaks down. It works fine with GL, but with direct 3D, it's like, well, the person writing the shader might have just made one sampler and use it for multiple. So if you're drawing 2 textures at once with different scaling filters, then you're in trouble, for example. So my solution to this is just a bit of validation in D3D11 render, that if you make a texture at T1, which is the register for textures, then there must be a sampler at S0. So there must be one matching for each one. That's how I did it. Then it behaves a bit like OpenGL. I had lots of different ideas of how to tackle this, but that's the one I settled on. So here you see that. But for some reason, he's a bit angry. He's screaming here, but it works, which confuses me a bit. And cute. You see here, this is my error. Texture text2 at bind point 1 does not have a dedicated sampler at a sampler register with the same bind point number. This is required in order to make D3D behave the same way as OpenGL, etc. But for some reason, when I actually use that one, then it says the pixel shader expects a sampler to be set as slot 1. Yeah, I get that. I understand you. There is something wrong in here. Duda. Oh, that's the low. Let's go look at draw. Maybe it's something obvious. Sure, constants. So blah 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 blah. Set samplers. Sampler bind point. Log.info. D3DT sampler bind point. 0. Okay, it seems to be 0 in both cases, but the texture is different. 0101. Okay, something tells me that I'm not setting this one properly. No, I'm not. Look, it's never referenced. It's just a small buggerino. It's 2D rendering library, like Raylib kind of, but written in Odin. This is the error bug here. I'm not setting the, what is it here? T.bindPoint equals sampler bind point. So should I maybe do this? T.sampler bind point equals T equals sampler bind point. Now it's not complaining anymore. This is what was missing. So yeah, I have a comment here about why I do this. This is a bit of a hack to make D3D11 behave a bit like OpenGL. I don't know where I have a found here. Oh, there's a loop there. Okay, and then it prints if it didn't feel. Fine. Right. So then that works. You saw that I got pixel here because it actually has it uses that all my samplers have nearest neighbor by default, not the other one was called linear or bilinear filtering or whatever. Bilinear. Excellent Swedish. Bilinear filtering? No. Bilinear. How do you spell bilinear? Bilinear filtering. bilinear. It's just, I don't know. Bilinear, bilinear. In French, it's called bilinear. No, it's not. Billionaire. Yeah, what's called in Danish. Billionaire filtering? No, I don't know. I'm not gonna try to imitate languages now because I suck at it. Yeah, everything is. There was this thing where I tried to do an impression of different languages, and everything just sounded like a bad a bad impersonation of some kind of weird Scottish, but it wasn't really. I'm not too good at it. It's not my thing. Right. So nearest neighbor, yeah. Oh, this is fun. Nearest neighbor, how you spell it with an OU. So I think that's the British spelling with the OU, right? So you spell nearest, I will use neighbor, spell like that. A color in British is spelled like that. However, I always spell color like Americans, but I always spell neighbor like British. Because color is color, but neighbor, like it just feels like there should be a U there, even in American English. Maybe you say neighbor, color, neighbor. You don't say neighbor, you say neighbor, right? So it feels like there is a U there, even in. So I just mixed. I mix American and British English on which one I would like the most, each word. People understand anyways, doesn't matter. There is this so Bill is British, right? So there is this this is center justify, and center with this order of letters is British, and then there is this constant here, center justify, note Bill, because Americans exist. English. Okay, this works. This I think the compiler crashed there. Well, let's see what happens in GL. I have a feeling. Wow. Oh yeah, I don't have a shader to start with, because this is part of the problem with my little library Reno here, right? That I don't have support for. We're gonna solve that later. It's not a good idea to solve now, because then you'd be like, oh, I have to build the biggest, like 90% of the repository is just shader cross compilers and stuff. Much better to solve later. GL multi texture fragment shader. I don't know why it's the other one is not called D3D. Maybe we could fix that. Behavior versus behavior. Yeah, I think actually I write behavior with a U as well. It's the same as neighbor. I think it feels like there's a U there, right? Behavior and neighbor with a U, but I don't write color with a U because it doesn't feel like there's a U there. And I like them Americans. I think no, I don't know I don't even know if it's the Americans or the British who use Z instead of S in some places. I don't know which one does what, but I like the Z because it looks cooler. But it's amazing. Everything's better with a Z. Okay, let's do a little ugly thing here. When Karl2D render backend, what's it called? Config of Odin. Karl2D. What's it called then? Render backend. Default render backend. What's this called? Backend chooser. That's a when render backend equals. No. How do I? Can I do it like this? Render backend interface. Oh, it's also. Can I do that? I should probably have some way to detect which one you're using. But, you know. No, this one is not exported. But it's a bad idea to compare against the whole thing anyways. I think I should redo how this file is structured a bit so I can easily compare. And I should have an enum or something also, like, you know. I don't know if it's possible to like use a config that it becomes an enum immediately or something, but render backend name. Ah, this code a bit ugly. This code got a bit ugly. I'm too tired to do this one. Fix it later. I'm gonna stop soon. I'm obviously not in the best shape. We're just gonna do this little hack for now. That's not the best way to do it because it's not gonna work with defaults, but right. So there you have that one. And there you have texture. Right. So let's now make sure that this works. Do again the 0 0 0 1 1 1. Yes, exact same behavior. Then we add in ticks 2. That's a shade multi-shader. How did I do this? Like this, C2, ticks 2. Yeah. That didn't work. Let's just do that one. That works. What's wrong with it's completely black. Yeah, there's probably something with those texture unit stuff. This is exactly why we made this one, because this doesn't work. Render backend active ta-da. So you just have a bunch of texture units that you can use. And I was just overwriting the same one over and over. So then we know what to do here. So you see, I did it very slowly because I needed to make a sample. And then I need to make sure I understand what's going on. And then and stuff. But that's how you need to do it. Otherwise you're gonna have half-finished stuff everywhere. Now the question is, we have bind texture here, so we bind no texture, 0 to it. However, this uniform here tells it, I think this tells the uniform which of these to use, I think. I guess that could still be there. I guess it doesn't matter. So now, where were we? We were doing the render texture, and I was confused why it was drawing. Without this, it's drawing the atlas for the font, because the texture hasn't gotten unbound. But actually what's supposed to happen is that it should unbind them if the texture doesn't resolve to something good, which might be 0 or something. So that's good. This is stuff with, yeah, OpenGL has a bit too much state hanging around, like you activate things, disable things here and there. So sometimes things seem to work, but then suddenly it only works because, like, for example, you might set something up in your init that is like, oh, this works when there's one texture, but then you actually have forgotten to like update some state throughout each draw call, because maybe if you have multiple textures or you have some different constant buffer set up, then suddenly nothing works. Because so we didn't get to the actual render texture stuff. I have to go at 5 and it's 3 minutes to 5. So that's that for today. And yeah, I'll try to do a bit more streams. I've been very busy, but I'll try to squeeze in at least once a week or something like that, just because I think it's fun to do these things on stream. And I always get interesting questions, so that's good. Thank you, everyone. Let's commit this before we write a nice commit message, because we have some new example stuff. Wait, I'm just gonna check that all the things actually work, because we can't just put in broken stuff. There was a log there that shouldn't be there. Render texture.odin log. Oh, it's this one. That one can go away. Yeah. And then we have this one and the GL version. The snake, and the snake did not work because load shader from memory in this case. Yeah, good. Box2D. This is a demo I made during a 1-hour stream a long time ago. But I made it with Raylib, but now I ported it. Pre-multiplied alpha. Oh, there's more. I have so many examples. I actually have a CI that checks these for me, that they build. I just wanted to go through them anyways. This one is not gonna compile. I knew that. That's also a Raylib example. Bunny mark still works. Gamepad. Start our. I bought a look. For those who have been around, they know I've used a lot of the time my trusty old PlayStation 3 controller, but I actually bought a Xbox one just to. I still have the PlayStation 3 one, it works. Just, I wanted a wireless one. And these are quite good. And it's cool that this just worked. And I added support for this to this demo for showing all connected, up to 4 connected gamepads. And if I turn this off, well, now it popped that up. That wasn't what I wanted. There, I turn it off. It should. Yeah, there you go, not connected. That's cool. And then we can build the API doc, which is my the Karl2D doc, this file, which is generated. It's just a documentation file. You see the shader stuff changed a bit there. So now we check the diff. Always check your diff before committing something, because so you didn't change things you didn't mean to change. Draw current batch, yes, that's good. Load shader from file, new function. Fixed up documentation error there. Source. Set the bind point. This, which I think is a compiler bug. that they complain about that. I'll investigate that a bit. Compile shader from source data, shader data, load shader resource. There's the default. Import runtime. Load shader was split into multiple lines. We have removed this temp allocator because that was a bug. It should not take a temp allocator. It should be explicit, because also there's no reason the render backend interface will not be used by anyone else. So you can be I can be as explicit as I want, and it's for use. It's an abstraction for use inside a library, not for the user of the library. Okay, good. This is multi-texturing bug fixes and some additional small fixes. Oh, I forgot to add a whole example. Multi-texture. Oh, there we go. Okay, that's that for today. Thank you for watching. I will